Okay, folks, going to work on some more of this study that we've been working on here. It says here my screen is loading. Seems like my screen is having a hard time tonight functioning. Maybe we'll just move the window away from the shared application. Okay. All right, so let's try this again. All right, there we go. All right, so we're going to work some more on this Lilith theory, and there's been a lot of interesting material in here. I would say we're getting down to the last third or so. It's got 212 pages. This is page 146. And it's talking a lot about what's happened in Genesis between the two accounts that, and this understanding seems to be a diverse account relative to the creation of Adam and Lilith. And then in the next chapter, it's switching gears to for Adam and Eve. Whereas Lilith is created on the same creative level as Adam, but does not want to submit to him or listen to him. Eve is taken from Adam. And so, and then it does explain the Yom Kippur ceremony, why the high priest would pronounce to Azazel over the scapegoat. It does explain some interesting things relative to the Book of Enoch and its recounting of the angels which came down upon Mount Hermon and made a pact with one another. It accounts for the race of the giants. And although some of this material may seem fantastic to consider, it is here nonetheless, and we can consider it in line with what we understand Scripture to be communicating. So we're going to continue here, 6.3, Azazel in the Book of the Giants. All right, so there's tantalizing incomplete evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls that suggests Azazel was a seed of the Watchers and not a Watcher himself. It comes from the fragmentary Book of Giants. If it had not been for the agonizing misfortune that damage to the scroll destroyed the critical phrase that may have sealed the deal concerning Azazel's origins, Azazel's identity might be correctly established today. Giants elaborates on the exploits of pre-flood giants, especially the two children of Samjaza, Oiha and Haya. Since no complete manuscript exists of giants, its exact contents and its fragments order remain a matter of guesswork. The critical fragment which suggests Azazel may have been the seed of the Watchers is below in brackets, indicating basically the ... means that this is indicating missing text. As can be seen, only one word remains from line 3. None of the line 4 survives. In the surrounding text, the giants Oya and Haya are discussing their demise. Based on the interpretation of certain troubling dreams the giants have been having, they have come to realize that a terrible destruction from Yahweh was headed their way. In the passage, Haya tries to suggest the destruction is not for them, but is for Azazel. Remarkably, Haya is implicitly equating Azazel to themselves as both being seed of angelic beings. Oya and Haya are not discussing the fate of their fathers, the Watchers, but of themselves. Therefore, when Haya suggests Yahweh's punishment will not be directed at them, but at Azazel, this is implying Azazel would be the lone victim. Enough of the text remains to establish the main basis of Haya's argument that they would not be targeted. It is that blank, the children of the angels are the giants, and that they, Yahweh's good angels, would not let all their loved ones be neglected. Therefore, Haya is arguing that their lineage is unique and different from Azazel's, and that the angels will show them mercy because of this. So here's the fragment from the Book of Giants. This is the Dead Sea Scrolls again. Qumran 530, fragment 7, and line 3 says your strength. Line 4 is missing. Line 5 says, thereupon Oya said to Haya, then he answered, it is not for us, line 6, but for Aziel, for he, the children of angels, are the giants, and they would not let all their loved ones be neglected. We have not been cast down, you have strength. Okay. The author then continues on. He says, I have not seen the photographic plates of this Dead Sea Scroll except from the Book of Giants. However, it is apparent from the translation that at least 12 to 20 letters are missing inside the bracket line 6. This is sufficient for the reconstruction below to be plausible. As can be seen, a very coherent argument can be derived from the fragmentary text that Azazel's lineage is from Lilith, mating with angels, whereas the giant's lineage is from the daughters of Adam, mating with angels. Haya argues they will find favor with the angels serving Yahweh because they share in Adam's lineage. And continuing on here in the Book of Giants says, thereupon Oya said to Haya, then he answered, it is not for us, but for Azazel. They've got this written here, Aziel, but it's the same character here. For he is the seed of Lilith with angels. Now he's putting this in here, but the children of daughters of Adam with angels are the giants, and they would not let all their loved ones be neglected. We have not been cast down, you have strength. Perhaps at some future date, this fragment of the Book of Giants will be reconstructed completely, if it ever is. I would be somewhat surprised if the name of Lilith or title of serpent was actually used. The whole notion of Azazel being the seed of Lilith appears to be purposefully hidden in all ancient books that broach the topic. However, in any event, I would expect some disparaging remark indicating that Azazel and his kin were of a more polluted lineage than the giants, who were born of the daughters of Adam and the Watchers. Okay, so now we're going to look at Azazel and Leviticus as the seed of the serpent. The strongest evidence that Azazel was not a watcher, but rather the seed of the serpent Lilith, comes from none other than the Bible. Leviticus 16 specifies a particular role of Azazel in Israel's Yom Kippur ceremony. As we shall see, this ceremonial role identifies Azazel as the infamous seed of serpent, whom Yahweh cursed in the garden. As we have seen, 1 Enoch strongly hints that Azazel was not a fallen watcher, but rather the firstborn seed of those fallen angels. Certain other clues in 1 Enoch further hint that Azazel was specifically the firstborn seed of Samjaza, the leader of the Watchers, mating with Lilith. Besides Azazel's proclivity to teach man evil ways, 1 Enoch provides little other insight into Azazel's nature and role in mythology. However, if 1 Enoch is silent on these issues, the Bible is not. Leviticus 16 specifies Azazel's amazing role in Israel's Yom Kippur ceremony. That role equates Azazel and his host as the counterpart to Israel, as the sons of Elohim in a bitter water trial. As such, Azazel is none other the infamous seed of the serpent, who is locked in eternal conflict with Eve's promised messianic seed. Azazel would bruise the heel of that promised seed, but the Messiah would crush the head of Azazel and his mother, the serpent. In Leviticus 16, Azazel plays a critical role in Israel's Yom Kippur high holiday. On this most important day, Jews believe they are cleansed of all their sins. Their sins are covered from Yahweh's sight, and thus they achieve atonement for their sins. In the ancient temple ceremony outlined in Leviticus 16, the congregation brought 2 goats to the temple. There, the high priest cast lots upon each to determine which one would be given to Yahweh and which one would be given to Azazel. That's the scapegoat in the King James Version. The goat to Yahweh was sacrificed upon the temple altar, and its blood was sprinkled upon the mercy seat to achieve atonement for the priest and then Israel. However, the goat to Azazel suffered a very different fate. The priest laid his hands upon its head and confessed, or literally placed, all the sins of Israel. The priest then tied half a piece of red cloth to the goat's horn and had the goat given to a ready man who led it to a particular remote spot in the wilderness. There, the man pushed it backwards down a jagged cliff, killing it. In the instant the goat died, the red cloth tied to its horns turned right. white, as well as the remaining half that remained in the temple. It was in this moment that the cloth turned white. The sins of Israel were cleansed. Well, this is that particular detail, I believe, is recounted in Flavius Josephus's book. Let's see here. I think it's Antiquities of the Jews. Yeah, that might be the one. Azazel's role in Leviticus 16 is controversial. Many scholars, both ancient and modern, refuse to accept the notion that the name in those passages refers to the popular demon. This is because the religious implications become almost too terrible to fathom. The passages would then seem to indicate that in offering the demon Azazel a sacrificial goat, Israel achieved atonement. In an attempt to downplay the ceremony's demonic aspects and to not confuse people with such seemingly idolatrous and worse notions, Talmudic writers apparently only referred to Azazel as a place in the desert, this place being Dudael, where Azazel was bound in 1st Enoch. The sages described the commandment to send a goat to Azazel as a hok, or a decree that is beyond human intelligence. Even modern Christian scholars who view the Yom Kippur ceremony as a prophetic archetype of Yahweh's sacrificial atonement see equal difficulty in the goat to Azazel. Alfred Edersheim, in scrambling to rectify the symbolism of the two goats in light of Christ's redemptive act, concludes both goats symbolize Christ. However, all the disharmony brought about by the goat given to Azazel can be relieved by understanding how the Yom Kippur ceremony parallels the Bitterwater trial. In doing so, the peculiar roles of Azazel and the goat given to him become clear. Azazel mirrors the defiled Soda, and Israel mirrors the innocent woman who undergoes the trial. The goat given to Azazel mirrors the defiled seed of adultery in the trial, which is rejected sacrifice that carries the woman defilement back to her and bring curses of death. The goat given to Yahweh mirrors the mystical first promised seed of the trial, which is an acceptable sacrifice that when slain brings atonement from the curses. Edersheim's confusion in assigning both the goats roles to Christ stems from the fact that he correctly identifies that the sins which the goat to Azazel bears are also the sins which the slain promised seed temporarily bears for Israel. However, the slain promised seed is revised, and the sins it bore away from the people are permanently placed on the head of the Soda's adulterous seed, which is modeled by the goat given to Azazel in the Yom Kippur ceremony. The goat to Azazel and the goat to Yahweh are very different and opposite creatures. The only thing they share in common is that they bear the curses of the ceremony. The goat to Yahweh bears the curses for but a brief time before it is revived and elevated to the seat of Yahweh, where it atones for all the sins of Israel. The goat to Azazel bears the curses for eternity while bound in the pit of hell with its wayward Sota, Azazel. Okay, so to understand the Yom Kippur ceremony is to understand the Soda trial, which is in the book of Numbers. And based upon these sources, it does seem to indicate there is a correlation there. And it's interesting, I think he notes that how they get around the pronouncement on the scapegoat by saying for Azazel, they say that is a location. So they don't really want to broach the subject beyond that because perhaps of sensibilities, certain amount of sensibilities in the church, perhaps they feel like this is venturing into too much about demons and that kind of subject matter. But I think that if we understand these issues in that lens, it gives us a greater appreciation of what the Master did for all of us in cleansing us from our sins, but not just personally our sins, but in cleansing us and all of humanity, that anyone who believes on the name of Yeshua is cleansed from all of the amalgamation and the mixing that happened before the flood and the demonic interference and so on. Okay, so the Yom Kippur ceremony, according to Leviticus 16:1, and the Yom Kippur ceremony was initiated after Aaron's sons erred in their priestly duties in the temple's Holy of Holies. They had offered incense with a strange fire, inappropriately kindled, and they're immediately burned to death in the temple by a flame which erupted from Yahweh. Okay, so this is I think this has to do with Abihu and Nadab, probably. After this incident, Yahweh forbids all priests from entering into the Holy of Holies except for the high priest, one day each year on Yom Kippur. Even then, the high priest could only enter after going through the elaborate series of sacrifices and rites specified in Leviticus 16. Edersheim describes this in great detail from rabbinic sources. The ceremony began with the high priest entering the court of the priest with a young bullock and 2 goats. The bullock would be a sin offering for himself so that he might complete his duties. One of the goats would be selected to be an atonement for all the people, including the priest himself. The priest confessed his and Israel's sins over the head of the bullock, which stood between the temple porch, beyond which was the Holy of Holies and the altar. He then moved to the eastern part of the court of priests, which was close to the worshipers. There stood an urn called kalpi, in which were 2 lots of the same shape, size, and material. In the second temple, they were of gold. One bore the inscription, La Yahweh. Isn't that something? That's an extra detail, isn't it? So basically, when he puts his hand on either the goat for atonement for the people or a sheep, sometimes it might be an unblemished lamb too. I've heard it said that it was more desired to have the lamb for the atonement of the people and the goat for the scapegoat. Because that is kind of in keeping with, the imagery that Messiah talks about, that at the end of the age, they'll all show up before the King of Life, and, you'll have the goats on one side and the sheep on the other. That's kind of the idea I get. But so it's not just what the priest pronounces over the scapegoat, which is for Azazel. What he pronounces over the sheep or the goat that is destined for the atonement of the people is for Yahweh. So it would be La Yahweh. Notice this here. Notice how he actually writes out Yahweh here, whereas he maintains Jehovah in the rest of the book, which it seems to indicate that's a bit, doesn't quite match very well, does it? Because here he is maintaining a clearly wrong name, a wrong transliteration. But in when he gives us the actual what's pronounced, they say La Yahweh. Okay, so basically, the 2 goats, this is Yom Kippur, stood north of the altar facing the sanctuary westwards with their backs to the people. The high priest faced the people and stood between the goats as he shook the urn, thrust his 2 hands into it, and simultaneously withdrew the 2 lots, one in each hand. He then placed each hand's lot upon the goat on that hand's side. It was deemed good augury if the right hand lot had fallen for Yahweh, which was the goat closest to the altar. The high priest immediately tied a scarlet cloth to the horns of the goat for Azazel, so that it would not be confused with the one whose lot was to Yahweh. The goat for Azazel was then turned around toward the people and waited there facing the people as the next part of the ceremony unraveled. The high priest returned once more towards the sanctuary, and there he slew the young bullock and caught its blood in a vessel. He handed this vessel to the attendant, who kept his blood stirring so that it would not coagulate. That's interesting there, isn't it? The priest then carefully entered the Holy of Holies, bearing a censer and incense. Tradition has it a rope was tied around one of his ankles. I've heard that before too, so that if he was stricken down dead by Yahweh, his body could be retrieved without subjecting anyone else to danger. This would be when he goes in with the blood to the Holy of Holies and puts it on the mercy seat. They would tie a piece of rope to his ankle in case, he was not accepted and he was killed instantly. So if they could pull the body out, that would be quite a scene, wouldn't it? Once inside, he emptied the censer on the coals of the censer and waited until the smoke had filled the Holy of Holies. He then exited, took the blood of the bullock, returned, and sprinkled the blood within the Holy of Holies. He exited it again and deposited the vessel with the blood upon a golden stand before the veil of the Holy of Holies. The high priest then killed the goat, set apart for Yahweh, and entered the Holy of Holies a third time. He sprinkled the goat's blood as before, and upon exiting, he set the vessel with the goat's blood upon a second golden stand. He then took blood from the goat and the bullock's vessel and sprinkled the veil of the Holy of Holies. He then did a very profound act. He poured the bullock's blood into the bowl which contained that of the goat and mixed the two thoroughly together. Now, these are details that I've never read that book, but these are interesting details here. So why would he take the blood of both the goat and the bull and mix them together? He then sprinkled the altar of incense with this mixture. This mixing of blood showed that the two sacrifices had become one in their expiatory power. That which was left of the blood, the high priest poured out on the west side of the base of the altar, a burnt offering. At this point, the high priest had cleansed the sanctuary and all its parts from the defilement of the priesthood and the worshipers. The Holy of Holies, its veil, and the golden altar of incense in the holy place and the altar of burnt offering in the court of the priest were now clean alike. Both the priesthood and the sanctuary were now atoned for in the relationship to Yahweh. Yet the ceremony was not over. The goat to Azazel, which had stood confronting the people with a scarlet scarf, remained. All the people's own personal guilt and sins were now to be removed from them and placed upon the goat. The high priest laid both his hands on the goat's head and pleaded, "Ah, Yahweh, they have committed iniquity, they have transgressed, they have sinned, thy people, the house of Israel. Oh, then, Yahweh, cover over atonement for their iniquities, their transgressions, their sins, which they have wickedly committed, transgressed, and sinned before thee. As it is written in the Torah of Moshe, thy servant, saying, for on that day shall it be covered over, atoned for you, to make you clean from all your sins. Before Yahweh you shall be cleansed." The priests then remove half the scarlet wool cloth from the goat's horns and affix it to the sanctuary door. They then led the sin-burdened goat out through Solomon's porch and then through the eastern gate. Here an arched bridge spanned the intervening valley, and they brought the goat over this to the Mount of Olives, where a ready man, specially appointed for the purpose, took charge of the goat. After a substantial journey passing through several stations where others would accompany him for a while, he finally reached a rocky cliff area at the edge of the wilderness, known alternatively as Duda-El. Isn't that so? That's where that Duda-El comes from. And remember that Duda-El is where apparently these fallen angels that are buried. They are buried under the ground there. They're in chains. These are all details I had not really been sure of before, but this is very interesting in that and then it's also known as Beth Hadudo or simply Azazel. He then pushed the animal backwards over the rock ledge. The goat plummeted below, and before reaching the halfway point, its limbs would be ripped off. Isn't that something? In the final years of the temple, after 30 CE, the slaying of the goat was immediately telegraphed by the waving of flags from station to station, so that a few minutes after its occurrence, it was known in the temple. Wow, so that's kind of like how they used to do for armies. They would have like if it was in a mountainous area, they would light a pyre, and then that would light another pyre and another pyre. And that's the concept that's on that movie series, The Hobbit, and all of those movies that came from The Hobbit. That's what they did. They showed that process there. However, tradition has it that in years when the sacrifice was accepted, this was not done, as the people immediately knew the result, because the half of the scarlet wool cloth affixed to the sanctuary door had turned white the moment the goat had hit the bottom of the cliff. Okay, so what he's referencing there is is that after 30 CE or AD, I like Anno Domini in Latin, means year of our Lord. But after that happened, when the master was crucified and then he rose again, no longer did any of these miracles occur. And so they knew there must have been a sense of foreboding among the Jewish people because they had missed out. They missed out big. And now none of these miracles were occurring. Okay, so in the King James Version, the goat given to Azazel is rendered scapegoat. This is in keeping with the King James Version's tendency to render the name of demons as common animals. Now, isn't that something? Remarkably, I think, as an additional note here, King James he is known to have included a separate book which went deeply into demonology, and so maybe the purpose of that separate book was to expose what had been covered up for the common people. Remember that the King James Version was meant for the common people in England. In fact, after the first edition, they even split the books. And this is how we end up with our 66 book canon in most of Protestant churchianity in the United States and in many places in Europe. Because of what happened in England. In fact, the first edition of the King James, I mentioned this, I think, at Shabbat, had many more than 66 books. They included apocryphal books, all in one volume, but they didn't really want that information getting out to the people. And so in the second edition, successive printings, they separated, and the people were only allowed to have the 66 books. But King James himself reputedly had it in an even further book, which would never have been allowed among the people. But this was a book on demonology. Let's see here. So continuing on here, so the King James Version tends to ameliorate the names of demons and make them animals. However, the lamed, inseparable preposition meaning two that is attached to Azazel, makes it clear that the goat is given to Azazel, let Azazel, or to Azazel. Furthermore, there is consensus from the Kabbalah and Talmud that Azazel refers to either a demon, a place in the wilderness, or both. Okay, so they probably refers to all of them because Azazel represents what these fallen angels did, and where were they buried? In Duadao, in this wilderness area, reputedly in Duadao. And so it probably is all correct from a certain point of view. Leviticus 16:10, but the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before Yahweh to make an atonement with him and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness. So where it says scapegoat there in the Hebrew, it says La'azazel. Leviticus 16:10, my literal, but the goat that ascended upon him, the lot of Azazel, he will continue to live to the face of Yahweh, for an atonement is upon him for letting him go to Azazel of the wilderness. Okay, so we have in, the Asher, Elah is like to ascend, leave upon him, or actually it's probably Alio, because this is probably a whole limb. Hagorel, let's see, there it is, Azazel, look at that. Okay, Yomed, Chai, comes from Chaim, to live. Lifnei, that means in front of or before the face. There's Yahweh right there. La Kippur, there it is, Kippur, for atonement. So it's where we get Yom Kippur, it means atonement. Alio, upon him. Let's see, le shalach, for letting go. The shalach means like sending away. Shalach is where we get our term shalioch, which means like an apostle. You're sending away. Let's see, told him, and then let Azazel, to Azazel, and then we have ha midbar, midbara. Looks like ha midbara in the feminine singular. In the wilderness. So this is what that is in the Hebrew. All right, so the most natural reading of Leviticus 16:10 suggests Azazel is a demon or god. This is due to the parallelism of roles with the goat given to Azazel, with the goat given to Yahweh. However, many writers of the Talmudic period, included the notable Rashi, wrote only of Azazel as being a place to which the goat was taken and killed. Well, the place where he was taken and killed, as I mentioned before, was where these angels were buried. As we shall see, Azazel most likely refers to both a person and a place. That's exactly what I surmised. Yeah, they did. Isn't that something? It refers to the demon Azazel, and at the same time, it may be understood to indicate the place where that demon was buried under a great mountain of rock and bound by the angel Raphael. Now look at that. There's that archangel, Raphael, in the book of Enoch, okay? So there's more. A lot of times when I grew up, I always thought there were only 4 archangels, but it's interesting. Yeah, what do you mean by that? You're going to catch it. Now that you pointed it out, I'm going to catch it. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay, so so the angel Raphael apparently is where he was the one who got these demons locked under this mountain of rock. So that's the same place where the goat to Azazel was taken on Yom Kippur. I mean, this is all incredible information that, see, I had not put all this together because I really had not read this far ahead yet. This is all new for me. And so really, and Rashi was not really, you see, a lot of what the rabbis wrote was symbolic, and it betrayed a deeper meaning. So when he says duadel, and then most scholars think this is location, it's hiding a deeper meaning. The location has significance. What is the significance? Well, the only book that tells of its significance is the book of Enoch, of which the Ethiopian church holds today. Okay, so when the goat was taken to Azazel, that's Azazel. Azazel could be understood as referring to a demon trapped in that dread place, or a locale itself. As already mentioned, many Talmudic writers may have wished to downplay the demonic role of Azazel and simply referred to Azazel as the name of the place where the goat was taken. Now, that's understandable. I mean, this kind of material, and of course, I took some heat. I took quite a bit of heat personally for even daring to broach this subject. I either had people just go, pshaw, it's poppycock. And then I had others saying, look, this is really not useful. But I do think it's important for people in Lihad to understand these issues, because it belies the importance of our salvation and how it was worked through and so on. Okay, let me see where our, I think we've got about might still have about a half an hour here. I'll check my. Yeah, we're good. All right, so next we're going to go into yeah. Yep. Well, first of all, it's number one, when you think about Adam having a first wife, that messes everything up. It messes everything that people presuppose about Adam. It introduces things that they don't want to even consider. It's good. But this is available for people who want to explore the issue. So I can understand why there's such a how shall I put it, a real hesitation to get into this stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at Azazel and his place of binding. So the etymology of Azazel is not entirely agreed upon. The King James Version and others presume it to be derived from a combination of Etz Azel, which the King James Version understand as the goat sent away, with Ez, Strong's 5795, meaning goat, and Azel, meaning sent away. However, Ez might best be understood as having the literal meaning of its underlying root. This underlying root is azaz, which means prevalence, strengthened, or impudence, in the sense of being strengthened against someone. Thus, Azazel may be understood to be more properly derived from the roots azazel. And a better literal translation of the name might be prevalence sent away, or perhaps impudence sent away. This name makes sense if Azazel were the seed of Lilith. She would name her son after his and her circumstances. Isn't that something? In prevalence sent away, because remember, Lilith was, she was condemned by Almighty God. She was sent away. And Lilith's perception, and that does follow, but goodness, that follows with all of the other names that seem to indicate circumstances in the Bible, doesn't it? Isn't that something? And Lilith's perception, she and her son were a prevalence against Yahweh, which was sent away from the garden. Lilith's key feature is that she is in rivalry against Eve and her seed, Yahweh's select, and that Lilith believes she and her seed should be prevalent on earth, just as Lucifer believed he should be prevalent in heaven. Interesting connection there. Although the etymology of Azazel is in doubt, there's some confirming evidence to suggest that Azal, prevalent sent away, is on the right track. This evidence comes from the name of Azazel's place of imprisonment, Duadael, mentioned in 1 Enoch 10, 4-8. Dudael is most likely derived from Dadael, meaning the submission to Elohim. Dada, Strong 1718, is rendered to go softly by King James Version, but it is clear from its two uses in the Bible, Psalms 42:4 and Isaiah 38:15, that it more properly means to submit. Okay, interesting. Genesius holds this meaning also, noting that it comes from a relatable Arabic root meaning to waver or to totter in going. So we see that by being bound in Dudael, Azazel was bound in a place of submission to Elohim. Now, I've often wondered, in Revelation, it talks about, the angels that were bound to the river Euphrates. I wonder if there's correlation here. I don't know. This is in perfect contrast to his boasting name, which was prevalent sent away or impudent sent away. Therefore, in judgment, the impudent against Yahweh is bound in submission to Yahweh's power. Dudael is sometimes referred to by other names. Yoma 6:8 of the Mishnah refers to the place as Beth Haduda. Well, Haduda is simply like the Duda. It's simply like the something, which literally means house of his piercing. The second word comes from the word Hadad, meaning to be sharp. As Connick points out, Beth Haduda is probably based on some clever Hebrew wordplay, for in Enoch 10:5, Azazel is tossed upon rough and jagged rocks, and the root Hadad sounds similar to Dada. Okay, interesting. All right, so let's take a look at this, Azazel's role in Yom Kippur. Azazel's role in the Yom Kippur ceremony begins to make sense when we realize that Yom Kippur is just another incarnation of the most prominent judgment mystery in the Bible, the bitter water trial. As we have seen, the first bitter water trial formulation in the Bible was the infamous judgment between the serpent and Eve. Of course, the most straightforward formulation was the Soda's bitter water trial in Numbers chapter 5 for the wayward woman suspected of adultery by her husband. Another critical formulation of the trial was Israel's golden calf judgment at the foot of Mount Sinai. Yom Kippur is just another formulation. That's interesting. Okay, so this is going to be interesting. It's going to correlate the golden calf episode. Okay, so Israel's golden calf episode of the bitter water trial. The Midrash teaches that Israel's golden calf episode gave rise to a fully enacted bitter water trial. In the golden calf episode, Israel was tested for idolatry against Yahweh, just as the Soda was tested for idolatry against her husband. Well, how was that test enacted? Well, remember, they turned to the golden calf because Moses was up in the mountain for so long. And they thought, we don't know what's happened to Moses, so let's get all our gold together and let's make an idol. Let's make a golden calf. Well, the cow was very prominent in Egypt among false worship, and so that's how that came about. Yahweh's judging Israel as a soda was appropriate because in accepting the Torah at Mount Sinai, Israel had entered into the covenant with Yahweh. This covenant was equivalent to a marriage contract, and Israel's subsequent breach of this contract with the golden calf was the justification for their subjection to the bitter water trial. Oh my goodness. I never thought of that. I never thought of that. So that explains why Moses had the Levites break down all of that gold and grind it up and throw it in the stream, and then he made the people drink of it. And it was bitter to them, but he made them drink of it. Wow, isn't that something? Israel was a spiritual bride of Yahweh, and idolatry with other Elohim was equivalent to adultery against Jehovah. In the golden calf episode, Moses went alone atop Mount Sinai after Yahweh had given the Torah covenant to Israel. Moses lingered there 40 days, and the people began to fear he had died. They pressed upon Aaron to fashion an idol for them. Aaron acquiesced and fashioned a golden calf with fire. The Midrash holds that Aaron did this so that the calf would be derision and curse among the people, and that indeed the calf supernaturally emerged from the fire alive and bleeding. Yeah, I read that before. The Jews believe that. Yahweh became angry with Israel and sent Moses down the mountain to judge them. Upon arriving, Moses gathered the Levites, and they committed a great slaughter in the camp. The Midrash explains that those slain were those against whom were at least two witnesses that confirmed they had worshipped the calf. Okay. Yeah, the calf got ground up. Yeah, but he broke the first time he came down when he saw them cavorting and dancing around this golden idol. He threw the tablets down and they broke. So he had to go back up again. Well, because the whole covenant was broken. He realized that. Okay, so let's see here. So here's Moses coming down to the mountain to judge them. So upon arriving, Moses gathers the Levites. They committed a great slaughter in the camp. So remember, he goes and he says, slay every man that's committing adultery, slay every man that's committing fornication, slay every man that's partying like it's 1995. The Midrash explains that those slain were those against whom were at least two witnesses that confirmed they had worshipped the calf. So the ones who had committed adultery were slain. Rashi and Kisisa of the Midrash explains that Moses then prepared bitter waters to determine who else in the camp was guilty, but against whom were no witnesses. Moses burnt the calf and ground it to dust. He strew this dust into water and forced the people to drink it. Remember, that was in Exodus 32:20 and Deuteronomy 9:21. Moses then ascended the mountain to pray for the people. He declared to Yahweh that if the people's names were to be blotted from Yahweh's book of life, then his own name should be also. In response, Yahweh agreed to save those who had not committed adultery against them. Isn't that something? That adds dimension to that whole discussion right there. But commanded that those who had sinned would die. They would be blotted out of his book. Exodus 32:33. At that time, a great plague struck the people because of the calf they made. The Midrash holds that this plague was caused by the waters Moses made. Moses made the people drink, and that it only killed those whom had secretly committed idolatry with the calf. So look at these three situations. You got the golden calf. The guilty people were drinking the bitter water. You've got the bitter water trial for a man who has a wife who is disobedient. And you have the entire Yom Kippur ceremony where the blood is mixed between the bull and the goat, which is for the atonement of the people in the Yom Kippur ceremony. And you have this kind of this. So it's going to go into these shared common elements. Okay, so the three formulations of the bitter water trial, the golden calf episode, Yom Kippur, and the trial itself, all shared common features, summarized in table 6.4. There is always the wayward woman element of the judgment. She is the adulterous, idolatrous woman who shall be judged and destroyed. In the garden episode, she is the serpent. In the golden calf episode, she is the Israelites who worshiped the calf. In the soda trial, she is the defiled, adulterous wife. And in Yom Kippur, she is Azazel and all his host and unrepentant Israel. There is always the innocent woman element, or the innocent people element, or the people who did not take part in the golden calf episode element of a bitter water judgment. She is the woman granted relief from the curses. In the garden, she is Eve. At Mount Sinai, she is the loyal. And notice how now he connects this. Notice how he connects this. Now, you got these parallels of the guilty, the innocent, and all these situations. That's further proof that Lilith may very well be a legit understanding of Scripture. Because Eve is after that whole fiasco with Lilith, she is then created to be a helpmeet for Adam. Okay, so in the garden, she is Eve. At Mount Sinai, she is the loyal Israelites who followed Moses. In the soda trial, she is the innocent wife. And in Yom Kippur, she is the repentant Israel. All the formulations share a seed of idolatry element. This is the seed of sin, which bears the curses of the judgment. It is rejected as an acceptable sacrifice to Yahweh, and it returns its curses unto the wayward woman for her destruction. In the garden, this is the serpent seed. At Mount Sinai, this seed is the golden calf. In the soda trial, this seed is the supernatural seed of adultery. And in Yom Kippur, it is Azazel and the goat given to him. Wow. So he's going through all of the innocent parallels, and now all the guilty parallels to all these situations. So all the formulations have a slain promised seed element. This is the mythical seed of Yahweh, which is the incarnate manifestation of Yah himself, which is an acceptable sacrifice to Yahweh. This seed is able to carry away the curses of the judgment from the innocent woman. And when its sacrifice is accepted by Yahweh, the curses are not returned to her. Now, I wonder if there's a connection here to what Paul talks about, where he says, she shall be saved in childbearing. I've often wondered about that, because I thought, well, what about a woman who is redeemed and she just can't have a child? That's often been a puzzle to me. But maybe but see, it literally does say she shall be saved in childbearing. And that's curious to me. It for sure is. That's a bit of an external subject to this whole thing, but it gets me thinking. This is Eve's bruised promised seed in Eden, Moses and Sinai, the mystical seed formed from the dust of the water and the soda trial, and the high priest and the goat given to Yahweh in Yom Kippur. This is a very interesting chart here. I think I might go back at some time and take a look at that, because that chart could be useful. I wonder if I could. Yeah, it does allow me to take it. Okay. Okay, so table 6.4, comparing various biblical formulations of the bitter water judgment. Finally, all formulations have a revived promised seed element. This is the slain promised seed restored to life. In the garden, this is Eve's promised seed, which, although bruised, returns to slay the serpent and her seed. In the golden calf episode, this is the return of Moses from his extended stay atop Mount Sinai. Okay. That is a revived promised seed element in all of these stories. Okay. In the Soda trial, this is the promised seed to the innocent woman, and in the Yom Kippur, this is the high priest who is cleansed by the blood of the goat to Yahweh. Wow. He walks into the Holy of Holies and achieves atonement for Israel on Yom Kippur. Isn't that an interesting element? So it's almost like out of bad comes good, that Yahweh makes a way for good to come out of bad. And Yom Kippur, the goat to Yahweh, the high priest, and Yahweh are all manifestations of Yahweh himself. The goat to Yahweh is the slain promised seed. Now, this is an interesting aspect here, because often I've thought of the Passover as being indicative of, what Messiah did. But he's taking this an extra step here and showing us the ways in which Messiah Yeshua himself fulfills aspects of the Yom Kippur ceremony in ways I had not thought of before. And Yom Kippur, the goat to Yahweh, the high priest, and Yahweh are all manifestations of Elohim. The goat to Yahweh is the slain promised seed. That would be Yeshua, right? Whose blood and sacrifice allow the high priest, the revived promised seed, to ascend to Yahweh and the Holy of Holies and make atonement for all of the people. Notice I remember that in remember Yeshua when he was in his resurrected body, and one of those ladies, Martha or Mary, came and says, "Don't touch me yet. I have not ascended to the Father," because that would have polluted the sacrifice of himself being shown. But that's in the New Testament. Very interesting there. So basically, so this is the Christian understanding of the ceremony, where Messiah is the sacrifice, the high priest, and Elohim. By parallel, and this is interesting too, because if all the miracles have stopped and the Jews knew that they were no longer getting atonement, why in the world would they have continued on just stubbornly? And Paul explains this by a veil being over their eye. So by parallelism, who expected the same imagery on the other side, then why is one goat to Yahweh while the other is to Azazel and not to Lucifer? Well, I think I can come up with that reasoning, because Azazel represents the corruption of humanity on the earth, whereas Lucifer is merely the tempter. Let's see what he says. The acceptable sacrifice is to Yahweh, because Yahweh accepts the sacrifice and takes on the curses of the judgment himself, or on his dear son, the Messiah Yeshua. However, the rejected, remember Yeshua was on the cross and he said, what did he say? Father, forgive them. And then he said, it says all the sins were on the world were upon him. And, I can't remember exactly what that. I'll have to look that up, but it just kind of came to my head here. So Yahweh accepts the sacrifice of Messiah Yeshua. However, the rejected sacrifice to return to Azazel. Remember that one guy, he was, there were two guys crucified along with Yeshua. One guy said, "Master," and he chastised the guy that was trying to get Yeshua to just use his power to get them all down. And the one guy, he said, "Look, we're here justly. We have committed sins. Leave him alone." And then he turns to Messiah and says, "Master, forgive me my sin. Remember me in your kingdom." And Yeshua accepts it. He says, "Today I tell you, you shall be with me in paradise." Isn't that something? So then the other guy on the cross is like Azazel. He went down there. He's in hell. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears here to Azazel. However, the rejected sacrifice to return to Azazel, and the curses of the judgment returned to him and his host. Indeed, in the Yom Kippur ceremony, lots and cast, and the goat on whom the lot to Azazel falls is rejected as a sacrifice in the temple. It is sent away back to Azazel with the sins and curses of Israel heaped upon it. This is the same consequence of events in the Soda trial. In other words, where the guilty woman receives the curses after the second drink and her thigh rots. And according to Talmud, she literally shrivels up and dies on the spot. Now, I don't know if that is true or not, but she definitely did not live long, I don't think. The sacrifice of the defiled adulterous woman takes the curses away from her first drinking. However, because the sacrifice is rejected upon the altar, when the woman drinks a second time from the bitter waters, the curses return to her again, and they do not depart again, but consume her in fiery curses. Interesting. Right, we're getting down. I think we've got just a few more minutes left here. All right. Okay, 55. Okay, let's carry on just a little bit here. I got 5 more minutes. Let me see if I can get to this other. Okay, let me see if I can get to here. Okay, so finally, the miracles of the temple. Further clues linking Yom Kippur and Azazel to the bitter water trial and Lilith can be seen in the history of the only 2 miracles that took place in the temple on a regular basis. Now, he's wrong about that. These were not only 2 miracles, because Flavius Josephus in his Antiquities of the Jews recounts other miracles. One of those miracles is that when Israel was in good standing with Elohim, the high priest would come in, and this would be the day of Yom Kippur, and when the high priest would come to the temple doors, they would open by themselves by angelic. Now there's some other ones too, but the string one is pretty well known. So I don't agree with him there, but there were more than 2 miracles. So these miracles were the soda waters, bitter water trial, and the changing of the scapegoat scarlet woolen cloth to white on Yom Kippur. So after this, the soda water bitter trial, it never worked. There was never any kind of a miracle that happened there. Tradition has it that the soda trial never failed to deliver its miraculous curses against the adulterous woman, and that the scarlet cloth never failed to turn white on Yom Kippur, at least until 30 CE, which is when Yeshua was crucified. After that date, the same year of Yeshua's crucifixion, the miracles suddenly ceased. For the 40 remaining years of the temple's existence, the bitter water and scarlet cloth miracles were replaced by 3 other ill foreboding miracles. Now, I didn't know about that part. Well, let's take a look at this. The first was that the main lamp of the menorah could not be maintained lit by the priest. Okay, now I remember it. Now I remember. That was part of the cursing. They couldn't keep the thing lit. Despite their best efforts, every night for 40 years it went out. This main lamp was the mother lamp from which all the others were lit. Its fires were always to be kept burning. The second ill-boding miracle from the Talmud is that the temple door to the holy sanctuary opened of its own accord each night. Now, this could be the case, but I seem to recall in Antiquities of the Jews that the door would open for the high priest going into that area. And so what's happening is here in the cursing part of it, they would open up outside of that. So that's like inviting demonic presence in. That's the symbolism there. This exposed the holy place. Yochanan ben Zakkai, the leading Jewish authority leading up to the time of the temple's destruction, declared that this was the sign of impending doom. Well, the Romans came through, didn't they? And they looted everything. The third ill-boding miracle concerned the lots for the scapegoat. For the last 40 years of the temple's existence, during every Yom Kippur ceremony, the lot was always found in the priest's right hand. It was considered a good omen if the lot for the scapegoat was found in the priest's left hand. The odds of this happening by chance are astronomical. So what they're saying is that for all the years leading up to that, the right hand would hold the proper lot. But it changed after that. Why did the bitter water and scarlet cloth miraculously stop? Edersheim explains that the scapegoat's scarlet cloth miracle ceased because the ultimate atoning sacrifice, of which the Yom Kippur ceremony was just a prophetic foreshadowing, was completed in Yeshua Messiah. When he was crucified on the cross, he went in the center of the earth 3 days and 3 nights, and he rose again. And so he showed himself to the Father. He made atonement for the sins of not just for Israel, but for all humanity who would believe upon him. Now we see that the bitter water trial stopped for much the same reason. The story of the trial's supernatural promised seed and its atoning sacrifice was now completed. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Next time, we're going to pick up this here, Azazel and Zohar as the seed of Lilith. We'll go into more details here, but we're getting you know, I should be done with this. I should be done with this before long. So anyway, I hope for all of you out there that are viewing this video, I hope that you enjoyed and learned something from this. Please don't be offended by the depth and the nature, the sensitivity of the subject matter. If you reject Lilith, that's fine. If you accept Lilith as part of the narrative and weaving all of these elements together, I think I hesitate to even say where I fall, but I suppose you could probably guess given all of my attention to the subject matter. But may Yahweh bless all of you and keep you, and may he shine his face upon you and give you shalom. Shalom, shalom, everyone.